Now it is my pleasure to present Mrs. Marie-Christine Esposito, French Ministry of Transport. She's going to inform us about technical aspects of CITS. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm I'm the chair of Working Group 2 within the Seawords platform. The Working Group 2 is the group that manages the different specifications that ensure interoperability across all the member states in terms of technical details, but also functional details. So the main production of the Working Group 2 is managed by 5 different task forces to ensure that we follow all the levels that are needed to ensure, I would say, a good deployment afterwards. So here are the productions of the Working Group 2. You can see that there are many documents. I will go through each of them to make sure that you have a full vision of the work of Working Group 2 and its own task forces, and then afterwards you will have the details of the different task forces. So here you have the functional specifications. The Task Force 2 is managing that. This document is actually the basis where we define the use cases and what we aim to provide to the users. Ono 2 will present afterwards the details of the work and how it is managed. The second step, while defining harmonized profiles, I would say, is the technical specifications. Technical specifications are part of different specifications themselves. First, we start with still something that is agnostic of the technology, same as for the functional specifications, is the technical specifications of the messages. So those are valid whichever channel we use. As mentioned before, we are working in a hybrid perspective. So Task Force 3 is defining the technical specifications of the messages. Same, that is agnostic and not dependent on the technology, is the governance of security. So you will see a presentation from Task Force 1 as well, right after. After that, we define for each technology in the hybrid scope the requirements, the specific requirements. So for ITSG5 requirements, we have Task Force 3 and Task Force 1, both working on different details. So Task Force 1 will define, of course, the security requirements. And Task Force 3 will define the technical requirements for ITSG5 at the different levels of an CITS station. Then we have Task Force 5, which is the hybrid task force. Task Force 5 is defining the IP-based interface profile. So that means the details of the interface, technical interface, to make sure that the different elements are able to send the previous messages that I was mentioning across also an IP interface. We are in the process of defining a clear hybrid requirement that will make sure that what we define in the ITSG5 profile and on the hybrid profile, on the IP profile, works on a full hybrid scope. So this document is still under preparation, but that's one of the goals of Seawords. So far, I would say that this document will just be a presentation of the way that things work, but we are currently quite confident that we are fully hybrid. And finally, we have Task Force 5 that makes sure that every requirements that we've defined are properly tested. So they are designing test plans and then follow up on all the testings that are undergoing cross-border tests between the member states. So this is Working Group 2, the scope of Working Group 2. we are not working only by ourselves, of course. You had the presentation earlier from Marek. So our documents must take into account everything that Working Group 1 is doing in 3 points, I would say. So everything that's about the regional policy, the legal constraints, the conditions of deployments, everything that Working Group 1 is actually doing, we have to take them into account. And of course, after we've deployed, after we've done the tests, we need to evaluate, and Working Group 3 takes the job afterwards to define what's needed for evaluation and to ensure that what we've defined as a functional use case actually works and answers our objectives. So how do we proceed within Working Group 2? Basically, we produce releases. We have 9-month workload of production for a release, where you can see here, it was an example from when we started the process of releases, but now it's the same, just shifts every year. Basically, we start in March to produce a release in December, or we start in September to produce a release in June. And it works the same way that I presented it to you earlier. Basically, Task Force 2 starts defining the functional specifications. Then Task Force 1, 3, and 4 produce the technical specifications. There are validation at every step from the Working Group 2, so at the Working Group 2 level. And then at the end, we have Task Force 5 that takes the technical specification, the functional specifications, and define the test cases so that the member states afterwards, after the validation of the release, can do the proper testing. And at the end, we have steering committee approval after the initial steering committee decision to approve the content of the release that will be produced 9 months later. So now we have just like a few days ago defined the release 2.0 at the Working Group 2 level, and we hope that by the end of the month the steering committee will approve it, and we'll be able to move to a release that is fully compliant and interoperable between all the member states for full deployment along with the protocol. How does it work? Basically, the harmonization process, we have the member states that propose potential new services based on existing standards. Usually, they must be specified, implemented, and tested by at least one member state before entering the harmonization process. Based on that, we prepare drafts, so each task force, as I was mentioning earlier. And then there's a clear review process where the member states review the documents, and then there are comment resolution meetings, and then resolution, and then a validation at the Working Group 2 full meetings. And then they are proposed to the steering committee, as I was mentioning. So hopefully next summer there will be the release 2.0 that will be released to the public. And then we have a full catalog of keywords of all the services. And just an additional and final comment on to broaden the scope. We are working within keywords, but not only within keywords. We work with external partners as well, especially the Cartica that was mentioned quite largely during the day. So whenever we produce a release, we have a change request process to make sure that we are able to take into account the different requests from other stakeholders. And for your information, our change request process is open to external stakeholders. So if you have a problem or difficulty with any of our releases, you can use this request to propose a change to us, and this one will be analyzed by each task force and then proceed as the same proceeding manners that the steering committee that I mentioned earlier. And I think that's all for me.